Some of these critics, these pundits,
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
They like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you know, you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
All right, 20 past 8, OTB AM, Friday morning, quick picks. Will, Aisling, morning to you.
Morning,
Top of the morning, lads.
How are we doing?
Good now, not too bad. How are you?
All good, I think.
Mildly nervy about a Tailteann Cup semi-final between our counties, Adrian Barry, but aside from that,
I'm not that nervous, Will.
of course you're not. Offaly barely able to train last night due to a virus, and they've lost one of their most important players. So this has all played nicely into Westmeath's hands. Get Kevin Maguire back, and I've got a full team to pick from.
I'm not going to mention the words, Will. I'm not going to mention the words. We'll come back to that game in just a few minutes' time. I don't think we've a leaderboard, have we? This thing is an absolute shambles. It is as bad as the GAA, as a GAA disciplinary system. It's an absolute shambles, and a bit like a GAA disciplinary system, we'll make it up as we go along, a bit closer to the time. So on that basis, let's get straight into the hurling to begin with. Galway and getting the fingers from outside, Colm. That's not the carry on of a Friday morning at this early in the morning. If Galway, Cork.
Any idea who's winning?
Yeah, but I'm sure I'm thereabouts, Aisling. After that, I'm not.
You were at the bottom, Adrian.
I absolutely.
The viewers are winning, Aisling, with entertainment. That's it.
Tommy, that's right. Come on, Will. Tommy is Tommy, I think.
Okay.
Galway, Cork to begin with, and it's Galway for everybody apart from you, Aisling. So you better lead us off.
Oh God, right. Jeez, I'm surprised with that. Right. Well, obviously I was at the Leinster final, and I seen Galway that day, and they were absolutely devastated after that. And I think the biggest thing was that they walked away and they just didn't perform. So they came away from that game knowing we actually just didn't show up. We didn't play the hurling that we know we can play. And yeah, they were just shook by, I think, the physicality of Kilkenny, and they were just way stronger on the day. And I just think to bounce back from that hurt, it's going to be tough to do. When Cork, I've only seen them once now in person this year. I've seen them against Tipperary, which I know Tipperary haven't really been at the races this year, but I just found that things were clicking for them. Conor Sheahan, I think he's unbelievable for them this year, and yeah, he's just been putting up some great scores. And I think overall, I just think there's big performances in them, and it took them a while to get going, but I just feel that they might edge it because of how Galway played in that Leinster final. I think it's going to be tough to come back from that, but yeah, it's going to be close. It was a hard one to pick, but I do stick by Cork doing it.
It absolutely has one of those fixtures that could make mugs of for the rest of us. Patrick Horgan on the bench for Cork again. Will I see this morning? There is this thing of, you know, could they be better off without him? And we'll see. Does he start obviously on the day? Maybe they are better off without him. I don't know. But the absence of his name from the team sheet, if it plays out that way, almost in itself gives Galway a bit of a lift.
Yeah. Look, I'm not entirely convinced that he won't start. He's obviously named within the matchday squad, so they could make a late change before the game at Temple Stadium tomorrow. Look, there is a strong case to say that their best hurling of the year so far has come in the last three fixtures, and they have maybe benefited since the Waterford game when Tim O'Mahony went into that inside forward line and creates a different option to Patrick Horgan. We've seen the stats throughout the championship that Conor Sheahan has been getting through a remarkable amount of work, and the rest of the Cork forward line, and maybe despite the championship's best strikesman of all time, the top scorer in the championship of all time, he's probably the best shooter that they have among their group, but maybe the group works better without him on the pitch. I'm still not entirely convinced that he won't start tomorrow, though. This is the toughest game of the weekend to actually call, though. Like, this one is a literal 50-50. Galway have won the last 4 championship meetings against Cork. You can't overlook entirely, though, the way that Galway played in the Leinster final, and particularly their inefficiency in front of goal. Their shooting was really poor. But this should set up nicely for Galway's physicality against this Cork team. They'll feel that they can bully them. They'll feel that there's been one poor performance in Henry Shefflin's side so far this year. They dust off what happened at Croke Park in the Leinster final, where there was some good stuff from Galway, but very poor work in front of goal, and that they can get back to form against Cork. The big worry I would have if you were back in Galway in this game is that Cork's pace and that forward unit could cause problems for Galway during the game. This for me is an absolute coin toss, but I just got to edge towards Galway in this one to get to the semi-finals.
It feels like it's a coin toss because it's a fixture we don't see very often in the hurling championship. Like you say, it's 4 wins and the bounce for Galway. The last of those was in 2015. So when I'm looking at this, I'm not sure does it feed into it too much. But for me, I was listening to Tommy Walsh during the week, and I think Tommy actually tipped Cork, but it was his analysis of Galway that got me a little bit hopeful for Galway. Was that he was saying that their Leinster final showing was down to inaccuracy, and that with a bit more accuracy up front, a bit more of a sharp edge in attack, they would have won that game against Kilkenny. And for me, that's a thing that is not even fixable over the last little while, but something that could have just gone the other way for them. They could well be Leinster champions at this moment. I do think, though, that there's like a randomness around these quarter-finals, and it's going to be a bit of a mad game. I'd agree with Will that it's probably the hardest game of the weekend to call, but it's just that before 2 weeks ago, I would have said that Galway have a higher ceiling than Cork and are a better team than Cork. How damaging is that defeat in Croke Park to Galway is then the question. And after listening to Tommy Welch during the week, I'm not entirely sure it is. I think it's just that accuracy bit that they need to fix. And I guess because I'm picking Galway, I predict that they will fix that.
They need to fix their puck out as well, Eoin, which is the other huge problem that they had against Kilkenny. I'm sure that Aidan Murphy has been working on that, and the rest of the Galway management team would have been working on it for the last couple of weeks. They gave away a tremendous amount of ball back to Kilkenny in their own puck outs. Their own puck out was very slow, and that it kind of added a little bit to the poor shooting options that they took when they did get ball back when they recovered their longer puck outs. So if they can improve that, I think this Galway team, I'd agree with you, probably have a higher ceiling than Cork. And with Cork, we're basing everything on recent form. But then again, recent form might be very important if they come in with a huge team behind them in Thurles tomorrow. Yeah,
it's I suppose like the when you look at it, there is definitely a case for Cork. The defeats this year in the championship have been against Limerick and Clare, who most people consider to be the best two teams in the country. It's probably it's maybe an unfair stick to have beaten them with, in the sense of the quality of the opposition and consistency, really, for both of them. Well, isn't it? Like that's what both sets of fans are crying out for year on year from both of these teams. They just want to see a bit more consistency.
Yeah, I think if you were a Cork supporter, you would be really concerned if the performance is something like going back to Thurles, Waterford in the league final, and then the performance, particularly second half against Limerick. They perform like that, they're in big trouble against Galway tomorrow. Similarly, if you're a Galway supporter, you're just hoping that it's one bad day in that Leinster final and that they can put all those issues behind them. I think they still have to work out some of their positions within the team. But again, if they can get Mannion firing, if they can get Conor Whelan firing, and I really did not expect that Keenan Fahey would be anywhere near the team. I thought he was going to serve a 2-game ban. But this is what happens when the CCCC decide to review evidence on Teams as opposed to in person, and somebody in Galway was clever enough to pick up that little loophole, and eventually it's led to 3 players being cleared for this weekend, and perhaps even far more importantly for Clare, the fact they've got 2 of their key players in Peter Duggan and Rory Hayes available.
It's absolutely bonkers. We'll move on to that game now that you mention it. Clare against Wexford. Here's how we've gone, and let's have a look now and see. We're going to come to that in a second. I suspect that it's and it is Clare across the board. Clare for everybody.
Unanimous. Well, sorry, no, it's not always unanimous things that blow up in our faces, but it generally is.
But I think that I think that like the only sort of slight caveat is maybe for Clare with the. Like I said, they probably are considered to be the second best team in the country at the minute. Perhaps actually the slight emotional come down almost from having run Limerick so close the last day, and maybe the physical come down of obviously it going all the way into extra time and all that. Like maybe that's the one caveat, but like we talked about the ceiling of Cork and Galway, the ceiling of these two teams is vastly different.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be a lot closer than we think. And we talked to Tommy Walsh the week, me and Eoin, and he actually thought that Clare, trying to bounce back from this will be extremely tough for them, when I didn't really think it would be as tough, because I think that they're definitely the second most informed team maybe all year so far, and I think they'll be raring to get back out there and put up another big performance and show that they should be going a lot further this year. This shouldn't be where they drop out, and I didn't think at all that they would be coming off the back of a loss and it'll be tough for them, when Tommy was really concerned in that way that, it would be tough for them. I think that the hurling that they played all year, they're a brilliant team. It's been brilliant to see them really coming to their potential. And yeah, the only thing with Wexford is, look, they are so dangerous when they get going. When you see the likes of Leach and Conor McDonald link up inside, they're very dangerous to stop. But now you're seeing Clare getting the likes of Peter Duggan, Rory Hayes, successful appeal their bans as well. So they have this boost again coming in. So it's a tough one to call. I do think it's going to be a lot closer than we think, but I do think that Clare will definitely edge it.
Are you having the closeness, Will, or what's your prediction of points difference here?
I would have thought it would have been a lot closer if the two lads were suspended as opposed to cleared midweek. Look, Damien Reck has obviously got a very important detailing job to do on Tony Kelly. We expect tomorrow afternoon. If he can try and keep Tony Kelly anyway quiet at all, Wexford will be able to keep that scoreline a lot closer than they will if Tony Kelly is running around and gets the freedom of Semple Stadium as we saw in the Munster final. I don't know, it's a huge boost for Clare to have the two guys back. I don't buy the idea that psychologically they're going to have any issues coming back from the Munster final. I think if anything they might be enamoured from the fact that they've been able to keep Limerick level on 3 different occasions after 70 minutes this season. And okay, extra time ran away from them a little bit. I think Limerick had some superior options from the bench, but it wasn't down to anything blowing up in Clare's face or anything like that. They took that game right to the wire in Semple in the Munster final. I think they've had enough of a break to come back. Wexford, if they're going to look for positives, Lee Chin has come in and has improved their free taking, and he was been free scoring the last couple of games. They performed when the back was up against the wall against Kilkenny, and everyone was probably tipping against them going into that fixture. So they're probably coming in under the radar, and they'll feel like they can go and give this a right good battle. They got to get Rory O'Connor into the game. They've got to get Conor McDonald firing. A lot has to go right for Wexford for this to be close, I think. And I'd be very, very surprised if it's not Clare going to an All-Ireland semi-final.
Is there a different dynamic here, I wonder, like just to try and temper our expectations here on Clare a little bit, even though we've all tipped them. So is there just a different dynamic about Clare now, playing Wexford, a team that they are heavily favoured to beat, compared to literally every game in Munster, where, not that they came from nowhere to come second in Munster, but most people wouldn't have had them in their top 3. So it's not just the Limerick games where they had this sort of fighting underdog chance. It kind of felt like every game that Clare went into, they had this sort of underdog mentality. Now that things have shifted considerably, where they are expected to put on a performance this weekend and expected to beat Wexford by a few points, I just wonder how that might actually factor into their performance this weekend. Also, when we're assessing Clare, are Clare the second best team in the country, or are Clare actually just the number 1 team when it comes to beating or potentially beating Limerick? I think those are two very different things. Now, in fairness, if you come second in Munster, you're probably going to be close to being the second best team in Ireland anyway. The table doesn't lie, to use that old cliche. But just those two things are giving me a little bit of cause for concern. Like reading David Fitz's column this week as well, he says that it's been given the prime fixture in Thurles this weekend because the Chiefs realise that this is actually going to be the best game of the weekend. And I'm not sure, like I always get nervous when I see a unanimous pick in these quick picks, but those two factors are in the back of my head. But again, those are intangibles, and when you look at the actual things you can quantify, you have to back Clare for this.
It is a perfectly valid question as to whether they're more suited to play Limerick versus a Kilkenny or a Galway, and we'll see about that starting this weekend. Right, let's move on to the football. We're going to move into the Tailteann Cup semi-finals, obviously, and we're going to kick off at Westmeath Offaly. Sorry, we're going to kick off at Sligo Cavan, and it's Cavan across the board here. Aisling, I don't know what case there is to be made for Sligo here. You're not feeling this one's going to be close, are you?
Not really. I know Sligo, they bet London, then they went on to beat Leitrim then in the quarter-final, that penalty shootout. And then Cavan, obviously, we know they bet Down and then Fermanagh. So the only concern is that at the moment, Cavan haven't been tested other than coming off, say, their Ulster games. So that's my only concern, that in this last few games, they haven't been tested. So is there a bit of complacency going to slip in there? But I think overall, if you look at the team, I think Cavan are a hell of a lot stronger. I think at the very start of the Tailteann Cup, I definitely tipped them to go the whole way. But I do think that Sligo, they're an up-and-coming team for sure. They put on some really good performances. That Leitrim game in particular, it was a brilliant game. So I do think it can be close, but I think if Cavan show up, play how we know they can play, I don't think it's going to be too close in the end. But yeah, I know I'm going to say the Cavan are going to win well.
Over to the stronger side of the draw, and Westmeath and Offaly going at it this weekend, and it's Westmeath across the board here. Will is obviously playing a bit of yourself and trying to...
I knew you'd accuse me of this.
I didn't say anything. No, but look,
16 hours ago, so I was like, I'm going to be accused of some kind of double bluff.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you on the points you're making in terms of, like, I've seen a good bit of Westmeath this year, and from the sideline, and they've been really impressive in patches and games. Honestly, like, I think I've seen patches of them against Longford, for example, down in Mullingar, where they played for 20 minutes of the second half of the first half, and if they were to play like that against any other team in Leinster, they would genuinely give them a good run for their money. But we talked about consistency earlier on. There's loads of quality around the team. Wallace, Luke Loughlin, and he hasn't started every game. Heslin, clearly. Sam McCartan has come on a lot. Ray Connellan on his day. When those players are firing and going well, and they've obviously a couple of players back this week, genuinely, when I've seen them up close, they've looked so impressive. But they just also have the tendency to just disappear out of games for long periods of time. They'd Longford beaten out the gap and suddenly just almost packed it in to the point that the game became somewhat competitive after that. So it's just on that basis. It's obviously the factors that you mentioned, Will, in terms of the couple of really unfortunate injuries picked up in the Offaly camp during the week and the virus. I think I'd absolutely go with you. It was a fairly 50-50 game up to that, but you'd have to lean towards Westmeath on the basis of that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I mean, it's contrasting fortunes when it comes to the injuries. So Offaly have been incredibly unlucky with injury, particularly with the Wexford game away from home in the Leinster Championship. It seemed that some of them were just starting to clear up, and then it was confirmed that John Furlong's injury was worse than first feared, so he's going to be out for 6 months. And then 15 minutes later, in the middle of a drill, Niall Darby, very experienced and important player for the team, goes over on his knee, and unfortunately he's ruptured ligaments in his anterior cruciate in his knee. So it may well be the end of his intercounty career, although Jack Cooney, the Westmeath manager, who would have managed him for 4 years at club level with Road, is convinced that he'll be back for next season, that he won't want the disappointment of missing out on the opportunity of playing in a huge game in Croke Park to be left behind. He won't want his career to end with an injury as opposed to on the pitch on his own terms. Like, this is intriguing. We're talking about Damien Reck against Tony Kelly. Like, it's going to be probably Johnny Maloney, the Offaly captain, up against Westmeath's marquee forward in John Heslin. Westmeath have got some very important players back from injury in recent weeks, like James Dolan, I should say. They've also got Jerry Egan fit this year, Kieran Martin fit this year. Last year, kind of injuries that caught up with Westmeath a little bit in the championship. This time round, it seems that they're just clearing up at the right time. Kevin Maguire coming back from suspension is totally key, because he's going to be the guy who's going to be detailed on Niall McNamee at the far end. And the last time against Carlow, Westmeath really struggled when direct ball was put into the forward line. Carlow caused lots of problems for them, despite the fact that Westmeath won that game quite comfortably. So Offaly have got firepower in their inside forward line. They've got a very unique situation where Niall McNamee is going to play at full forward, and you've got two guys who were less than 1 year old when he made his championship debut playing either side, in Jack Bryant and Keith O'Neill. So that speaks to the longevity of Niall McNamee, the current top scorer in the Tailteann Cup. So I think it would have given Offaly a lot more hope if Niall Darby had been fit, and if this week hadn't been as disruptive as it was. But the last few times that Offaly and Westmeath have played, Adrian, as you well know, it's been incredibly close. None of them have been classics. I'm not expecting this one to be particularly open in Croke Park at the weekend. But for Offaly, first time since 2014, they've played a championship match in Croke Park. I think Westmeath's Croke Park experience, as much as Jack Cooney was playing it down when I was chatting to him in Croke Park yesterday, has to be a factor too. Like, it's only a few weeks ago they played Kildare there. Yeah. They've been regularly going to semi-finals, got to a couple of Leinster finals there. A lot of their panel have got experience of playing there. By comparison to Offaly, last time they went to Croke Park, they got hammered by Derry in a Division 3 final last year.
I'm sure we doffed the cap to John Mahan earlier on and the job that he's done there, and he's got a very smart backroom staff, some big names and some lesser names, and they're cooking along nicely. And I'm sure they've been looking at that game. And Westmeath were also susceptible to that quick ball into the full forward line against Kildare. Really,
probably as well, Adrian, John Mahan's last year. So it's going to be intriguing to see.
Is it, Will? Yeah, is that?
I think so. I think that's the feeling at the moment. Now, look, if he wins the Tailteann Cup, he's got a very strong argument if he goes to Michael Duignan and says he wants another year.
Has he not got a strong case anyway?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, disappointment with the relegation from Division 2, the league this year. Tailteann Cup run has been decent, but the caveat would have to be that Offaly have had a very favourable draw to get Wexford, Wicklow and New York for this run to the semi-final. It's been Division 4 opposition across the board for a team who were operating at Division 2. Whether it's Declan Kelly, whether it's Tomás O'Shea that takes over the team next year, kind of remains to be seen, but it kind of feels like Tomás O'Shea is definitely being set up to be part of the management team for next season. But I think to Mon's great credit, he's used 9 of the under-20s from last year. It would have been very easy when you go into the final year of your term to say, I'm going to use the players I have available and the 20s can be eased in. He's actually developed quite a few players this season, even if not every Offaly supporter entirely agrees with the style of football that they play or whatever else. I think generally this has been a pretty positive year for Offaly, and hopefully, I'm going far more hope than expectation, they might get 2 days in Croke Park as opposed to 1.
What are you thinking, Aisling? Is it close, or what are you thinking?
I'm surprised by that. John Maughan news, I think he's doing a great job in there, and it feels like he's building. So, and as Will said about the 20s coming up as well, I think it's really exciting times for Offaly football. And as you've all said already, like, it would have been so different if, you know, Offaly didn't have the massive blow, especially of Niall Derby. That's really sad news to hear that, because it's extremely tough at that age to get an injury like that, and to be knowing that you're going out to Croke Park to play in a semi-final, just really tough for him. But hopefully we'll see him back. But on the basis of that, then you look at Westmeath and you see, look, they even got the likes of Kevin Maguire back in there, so they were getting a boost that way. So I think that Westmeath will edge it, but it would have been a totally different game, I think, if Offaly didn't have the injuries and the virus as well. I think it would have been totally different.
Yeah, like the factors of Westmeath being more familiar with Croke Park is something we discussed earlier on. I think that their performance against Kildare wasn't perfect or anywhere close to it a few weeks ago, but it was a 215 they scored in that game. It was a very good offensive performance. When you talk about it not being a classic, Will, I think that if it does turn into a classic, I think Westmeath will win this game. If it's tighter, I'm not as confident in them, but I've still backed them. I think the Croke Park factor is actually probably more intriguing for the other game on Sunday, Sligo against Cavan. Did I read somewhere that one of the Sligo players has never even been to Croke Park, let alone playing in Croke Park? So there's like definitely more of a novelty about that fixture, and more of a novelty about Croke Park in that. And also we've got a doff our cap to Tony McEntee, who as a non-Kerry man has done and performed the era of the year, I would say. He says that we played down in a challenge match and lost by 5 or 6 points, so there is still that gulf between ourselves and Cavan. Cavan are probably a Division 2 team and we're a strong Division 4 team, so that's exactly how you motivate your team to go in as underdogs on Sunday, and maybe Sligo will do something special.
Yeah, he used that exact line with me as well, Eoin, yesterday, so obviously
he's well practiced.
He had this planned before he went in.
Yeah, a couple of crackers on the TV, and we'll...
How have you never been to Croke Park? That is crazy.
That's mad, isn't it?
Sligo's a long way from Dublin, and not too many opportunities to go there during the year. So I think
another good start in the championship games, just before we finish up, lads. Donald Murphy has obviously been long serving for Sligo. Again, I was chatting to Tony McEntee yesterday. He was saying he's going to play 5 championship games this summer. He's played 15 championship games in his entire career. So it just goes to show the benefit of the Tailteann Cup to provide more games for counties like Sligo, who generally have been going out in the first round of the qualifiers in recent years.
Yeah, it's win-win. Fair play. Will, Aisling, thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers, lads.
That's Quick Picks.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable